Hey there, this is Nancy Love, live from Southern California, usually for the Planet Peace Project. But today I'm talking once again about the controversial science fiction story I'm writing as a screenplay, and hopefully we'll be able to create a movie from it about the woman who changed the game. She's also known as Stands with a Fist. She's also known as Justifiably Outraged, NK Ultra Love, sorry. Um, in this fictional story, which I'm going to just be starting to tell you because I'm tired of waiting for the luxury of the time to sit around writing screenplays. I'm trying to find my 5 cats who were stolen a year ago, and I just moved 130 miles to find my 5 cats who were stolen a year ago. That's why I wear this. That's why every single time I do a video, I show people cat pin that I've worn every day since then, and this reminds me of all the cats and dogs and horses, ferrets, turtles, and bunny rabbits that I've loved in my life. I want to see some more about NK Ultra Love. She's one cool woman. She has more courage than the next 14 people put together, and I'll describe for you another video who those 14 people might be. NK Ultra Love resisted being what's called brought in to the game. If I start yelling at you, it's may or may not be because I'm angry. It's probably because someone's going by with a loud truck or one of these unmuffled motorcycles or a jet plane is going over. So here we go. The thing about NK Ultra Love, one of the reasons that she is so angry is because she found out as a teenager that the military intelligence community that she was born into, the United States military intelligence community she was born into, had experimented on her when she was a baby. And that's why she is known as MK Ultra Love. It's a play, as of course, on MK Ultra Love. The controversial studies that are on often unwilling and unwitting civilians by the military a number of years back. Of course, that program's over by now. But NK Ultra Love found out when she was about 14 years old, and that would put it back in the 1970s, that she had actually been fitted with a nanobotic nuclear weapon when she was an infant, and that could be internally triggered by extreme anger or a decision, a fear-based or responsibility-based decision, or it could be externally triggered by God only who knows who. Some dude with a red button in the military somewhere. Now you would say, how on earth could anything, how could any weapon be triggered by anger or a decision? That's because even back in the 70s, according to this science fiction plot that we're discussing, the military already knew how to make electrodes that could sense thoughts and that could transmit brain waves into actionable equipment-based programs. So they already had the hardware, they already had the software, and nanobotic nuclear weaponry is very possible. I spoke to a contractor for Boeing about a year ago, and he said it was totally real. It was the real deal, Lucille. This person is chronically outraged from the get-go, really, because she finds out that when she was an infant, a civilian, and not a volunteer, she had been fitted with a nanobotic nuclear weapon and was expected to walk around with this thing for the rest of her life, and that at any point her own anger could trigger it, a fear-based or judgment-based decision could trigger it, or it could be externally triggered at any point in time without her permission or knowledge. the judgment-based decision would be if she were captured. And one of the things about this scalable thing is that it's scalable. I meant to say nanobiotic thing. Now, scalable, she was told, our character in K Ultra was told that she could decide, and the equipment would basically hear her and scale its explosion to one of these criteria. She could decide to take out a room full of people if she was captured, drop a building, take out a city, or take out a surface area the size of Kansas. And that's what scalable nanobiotic nuclear weaponry means. So anyway, NK Ultra lives her life pretty damn pissed. And she learns to announce herself when she moves to a new city like LA or San Diego or Austin or San Antonio, wherever she goes, New York City, wherever she happens to go. She always announces herself to the mayor and the police chief, whoever they may be. And those poor people are instructed by her urgent admonitions to contact the director of the National Security Agency and possibly the Secretary of the Navy and the President of the United States, whoever that happens to be at the time, because she wants them to know who she is. She doesn't want them to piss her off. And she has to try to teach them over and over, because some of them just don't learn the difference between a threat and a warning. When people, let's say in a police department or the mayors or whatever, actually begin to believe her and realize that she's right on and she's telling the truth and she's not bonkers, and our fictional character really was fitted with this bizarre antibiotic nuclear fleet, they sometimes say, "Oh, you're threatening us." No, she's not threatening anybody. She's never threatened anybody in her life. She's warning them. She's sometimes, our character sometimes pleads with these people in authority, tearfully, to respect her and to realize that she's been told the trigger could be anger. She was told when she was a child that a nuclear weapon could be triggered by her own anger or her fear or a decision she makes with a certain part of her brain. And so the analogy to these people who have the power to either scare her or not, threaten her or not, they're the ones threatening her, right? Make sure that you understand that. They're the ones threatening her because she tends to do things like fight international human trafficking, and she is really pro animal rights, and um, she lives in a context in which if you're a member of the Sierra Club or an animal rights organization, you're considered possibly a terrorist. So you know how that is. In point of fact, to break out of the frame for a moment, I was vice president of the Sierra Club and local chapter in Texas back in the 80s. I was also on the board of directors for Planned Parenthood in a local chapter back in the 1980s. And I was married then, and my husband and I supported like 20 different organizations, like Zero Population Growth and World Wildlife Federation, and all these animal and environmental and human rights organizations, right? And we found out that we were considered suspect, and that there were federal files, the United States federal government, to consider us, bad people. Well, excuse me, all those associations make me a good person. So back to NK Ultra Love. I want to live in a society in which people who are environmentalists and pro-animal rights and pro-human rights are considered good people. That's not terrorism. That's humanity. That's empathy. That's the power of love. So back to our fictional character. The analogy that she starts coming up with, and which makes a lot of sense to some of these police chiefs and mayors and so forth, is that If you were in a crowded theater and it was dark and everybody was just kind of hypnotized by the movie, nobody else was paying attention, but you saw a fire broke out in a side room, you would go running through the theater, right? And you would yell, "Everybody out, there's a fire, danger, danger, everybody, run, there's a fire." And that would be warning people. That would be being a good Samaritan. That would be you being someone who cares about others. Some people are so sociopathic, they'd see a fire, they just slip out the door. Who cares about everyone else? No, the vast majority of us care about everyone else. Thank you, God. Still, we all care about everyone else. And so when you run through the theater yelling, "Warning, warning, there's danger here," you're trying to save people's lives. You didn't start the fire. You're not threatening anybody with a fire. You're not guilty of having the fire. And when she explains this to people, they go, "Oh God, we realize, we're so sorry. We apologize, NK Ultralis. You were just warning us, weren't you?" And finally, she'd realized that she'd gotten through to people who needed so much, so thoroughly to understand that she's never threatened anybody in her life. But there is such a thing as a legitimate warning when you know that you've been fitted with a nanobiotic nuclear weapon long ago before you could volunteer. And if you could have volunteered, you wouldn't have. Let's get on to Unanimity. There will be many more installations. I'm just getting started here. This is kind of like a sci-fi tutorial, if you will. There's Unanimity, the concept of people not playing the game anymore. As I said in part one, there's this extraterrestrial force that comes to Earth and negotiates and contracts with various governments throughout the planet, and they do all kinds of awful things. They've installed computers under big cities, and they've infected just about everybody with nanobots. That's one of the reasons why immigration control doesn't want babies born, illegal immigrants. They're undocumented, uh, born at home with midwives. They want all babies born in hospitals. Why? Because all babies born in hospitals get to drink that special milk. That's what this accomplishes is a race of Borg, to use a Star Trek term. Gene Roddenberry, my hero, probably a time fleet admiral somewhere cleaning up probable timelines. The Borg is a useful concept for that, because in Star Trek, the Borg went from planet to planet, galaxy to galaxy, and overtook populations by implanting all these electrodes and everything. Well, they were visible. If you were Borg, you had all kinds of wires sticking out of you and things, metal parts and such. But these people, or either this other species, this group of extraterrestrials. Because if you put the right kind of nanobots inside of an organic creature, you can control that creature, much as if that creature were a robot. And for those who've seen police officers or military people do strange things that seem without conscience, for those, for that matter, who've seen politicians do strange things that seem lacking in conscience, that helps explain why they're doing it. They have been overtaken. They have been made robots through this nanobotic technology that's controlled by this species in our science fiction story here. So part of that has to do with the game. People who are recruited and infected with the nanobots, and people who have been brought into this whole corrupt system, which is really a form of slavery within your own life. It's a way of making you a slave within your own life, because they're always being asked something called protection questions. And those protection questions might be, would you, if you had to choose between one life or the other, would you choose your employer or your sales manager? And usually you make that choice and no one does, but sometimes they actually go through with it. And you're horrified by realizing that it wasn't a theoretical choice. It was, they're playing, they're betting. It's like casinos, a virtual reality casino. And people who are playing the game, individuals who are playing the game, actually do this. They actually operate upon the choices. So unanimity means that people stop playing the game. They do something called supersede their equipment. And when you supersede your equipment, what has happened is your sheer willpower, your beautiful, awesome desire to overcome being a slave and a robot gets the better of their hardware, and their software can't control you anymore, because your willpower and your beauty and your love is triumphant, and you become the master of your own life. And they're nanobots be damned. Their game, can't touch you. Can't touch this. Can't touch this. So people who have unanimity start following certain criteria. These are prescribed by their leader in K Ultra Love and cohorts. Many courageous people who join right away. As soon as one person has the guts to stand up to this horrifying system of rampant slavery, quite a lot of people do. And I'll tell you, to break out of the frame, the science fiction frame, for just a moment. Years ago in San Antonio, I had the distinct privilege and honor of sitting in a huge auditorium at, I think, University of Texas, San Antonio, and I heard somebody named Lech Walesa talk, the Polish union leader. And that guy has got to be one of the smartest people who ever lived. Even through a translator, he was able to make us laugh, make us cry. He was one of the most articulate. And here's one of the things he said. He said that he got so frustrated being abused at work and taken advantage of, and seeing all of his colleagues taken advantage of as well by a corrupt system, that one day he just got up, he stood up on a truck, on the hood of a truck, and started preaching to his people, to his colleagues at work. And he was just one man. And he said overnight, 100 people joined him. So overnight, he had the force of 100 people, not just one. And then he said the Pope got involved. He'd written the Pope, or somehow or another, the Pope got involved. And he said as soon as he was more than 1 million people strong. So that movement of his grew exponentially very quickly, because some people, hold on, it says that it may not be broadcasting right now. Gee, I wonder if there are individuals who wish I weren't doing this. There is truth in fiction, you know. So anyway, I'm back on now. So Lech Walesa said that overnight, that in a very quick time, I think it was about a month, he said he went from being one person with an attitude and a will toward justice and freedom to being more than 1 million people strong, and it grew from there. So this is what happens to the MK Ultra game over movement. There's a handful of people originally that hear her plea for justice and freedom and an end to slavery and an end to robotics, and they have the courage to stop playing the game in their own lives. The game can end in your lifetime if you stop playing the game. That's one of the criteria that people start to understand. Stop playing it. Solidarity. The first thing they do, I've got 3 things that I'll go into on another video, part 3. I will reiterate the principles of the new humanity, something that everyone swears to through the game with the lives of other people, other creatures, and their selves themselves. But I already put the principles of the new humanity somewhere in one of the posts, and I'll try to put that. I'll try to find that and put it next to this video when I put it on Facebook. Now, unanimity. No more. The first principle is no more innocence or sacrificed for this game. If someone asks you if what is called a willful perpetuator of the game, someone who's profited from it, someone who doesn't mind it, someone who's so evil and corrupt that they play it on purpose. If a willful perpetuator asks you to choose between the life of some innocent creatures, members of other species, young children, you refuse to sacrifice a cat, a dog, a horse, a parrot, a ferret. You don't do it. You don't sacrifice the life of an innocent, not a child, not a pet, not a wild thing, fly, no squirrels, birds, nothing. No innocence gets sacrificed ever again. You only go after the willful perpetuators. When you're asked to sacrifice or to choose between the lives of innocent creatures that are incorruptible or not yet corrupt in the sense of a human child, you won't do it. You say, I won't choose between the lives of innocents. I choose yours instead. And the willful perpetuators get kind of spooked by this because a lot of them just start dying. And the older you are, and the richer you are, and the more famous you are, the more likely you are to be in this particular society a willful perpetuator. Because I'm really not sure if I'm still being recorded. It keeps blinking on and off, and so if I'm still being recorded, I'm sorry if I'm being redundant, but it says wait while we reconnect, blah blah blah. Be patient. I've only got 2 points left to go on this. Point number 2. After we say absolutely no more innocents will be sacrificed, no cats, no dogs, no horses, no parrots, no ferrets, no children are ever to be sacrificed in this game again. Ever. Only the guilty, only the corrupt, only anyone who would willfully perpetuate such a system gets their lives targeted. Interesting story, huh? Number 2 has to do with, turns out, okay, we'll just reduce this to 2 points instead of 3. Parents are called the ultimate recruiters. And so those who are enjoining unanimity, those who are refusing to play the game, those whose rallying cry is not only solidarity, but game over. Game over. Stop breeding. They don't necessarily believe in abortion, and if they're mated and they get accidentally pregnant, then everybody who is trying to end the game in their lifetime and on the planet at large stops breeding in captivity. Remember when zoos kept wondering why pandas didn't breed once they were in zoos? Well, that's because pandas are smarter than people. Hello. You don't breed in a prison. You don't say, honey, we're slaves and we're robots, so isn't it a good time to start a family? No, you don't do that. Parents are considered, anybody who willfully, knowingly breeds is, if Hitler back in the 40s tried to recruit you for the Lebensborn eugenics program, you didn't join willingly. If Adolf Hitler said, hey, you're tall, you're blonde, you're pretty, why don't you have some babies with that tall, blonde, Aryan type of guy, and we'll generate Ubermensch and Uberfrau. We'll create a race of super people, and this is all a eugenics program by which love has nothing to do with anything, and romance is out of here. But I'm just trying to get a certain genetic combination going. And why don't you breed for Hitler? That's the way people are thought of. Anybody who slavery and rampant corruption, and believe me, it's global, is called a willful perpetuator. It's called a victim generator, rather. And parents are considered the ultimate recruiters because no one could be victimized by this if they didn't exist to begin with. The people do believe in the immortal soul. The group in Game Over do fighting for their freedom and the freedom of everyone, yours included. These people believe that they are immortal and that they believe that there are other dimensions of existence and they can at some point travel to them, and that's why they know that there are probable timelines in which the software infection has not occurred on this planet at all. That's how they know for sure that they can return to innocence and that they can help as pioneers, as courageous pioneers, help the entire world return to innocence. Can you imagine a world that corrupt, that goes back and reverts back to a context in which nobody plays games with one another's lives, nobody plays games with the lives of innocents who haven't had the chance or don't even have a concept for becoming so corrupt? Can you imagine the freedom? And I hope that you care. NK Ultra leads a group of individuals so courageous that they supersede their equipment. They refuse to play the game. They go after the willful perpetuators, and they're known as harbingers. They are known as those who led the world from a destroyed and corrupt one to a new Garden of Eden. They take the planet from one of pollution and overpopulation and corruption and slavery, and spread invisible slavery to a planet of freedom and sweetness and cooperation and love. More on this later, much more. This is how the world achieves game over.